Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, September 20th, 2018, and this is episode 73. My name is Carol. I am known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. Show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog and also in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via private message on Ravelry by leaving a comment on YouTube or by commenting in the group. And I guarantee I'll get back to you sooner or later, preferably sooner. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today on this kind of showery day here in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada. Yesterday I was in short sleeves and capris and bare feet, but I'm afraid today I'm back into long sleeves, long pants, and wool socks. That is basically fall in our corner of the world. We do live in a rainforest after all, as my daughter is very fond of reminding me. I hope you're all doing well this week. Thanks to everyone who reached out and said hello. I always appreciate hearing from you. Getting excited. Not this weekend, but the next weekend is Knit City being held here in, well, not here in where I live, but in Vancouver, not far from where I live. And I am looking forward to attending that. I still haven't figured out if I'm going in on Saturday or Sunday, but I'm definitely going. And if you are, please let me know in the either by private message, or there is a thread in the Ravelry group. I think it's titled, "Are You Going to Knit City?" I know one viewer that is going, and we're going to meet up, but I'd love to meet more of you. So by all means, let me know if you're going to be there. I was watching the Suburban Stitcher podcast, catching up on a couple of episodes the other day, and she was showing some sweaters that she's been knitting and planning to wear to Knit City. And definitely yesterday would not have been a sweater day or a shawl day or a scarf day. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. If it's kind of like today, a sweater might be appropriate, but you just never know. We go through some winters where I hardly wear a sweater or winter coat, but then others are definitely colder than that. So I'm not really making any plans on what I'm going to wear yet. It'll be a wait and see kind of situation. It's going to be a short show today. I did a fair bit of knitting, but I only worked on a couple of projects this week. And so I'll have those to show you, and I'll talk a little bit about what's up and coming, a little bit about what I've been reading, and I have a few things coming up this week that I'll share. So I think the first thing that I'll show you, you saw this last week finished, but I hadn't blocked it yet. So I just thought I'd give you one more look at my Aurora Shawl by Helen Stewart. I'm really happy with how it blocked out. It's nice and drapey. Actually, I guess it would go with my t-shirt here. Definitely, now that it's blocked and I've had more chance to look at it, I am happier and happier with it all the time. So I do look forward to wearing that this fall and winter. All the details are on my project page, and there will be a link to that in the show notes, but just to briefly recap, the shawl is knit out of 6 different colors of Sweet Georgia yarns, Tough Love sock, and 4 of which were part of a Party of 5 mini skein set, and 2 were leftovers. So all the details about all the colors, I won't go ahead and repeat them all now, but you can find them on my project page. So there, one last look at that success. Yay! Very happy, as I mentioned last week, to have finally found just the right project for those mini skeins, because I've tried without success a few times. The first thing I'll show you that I've been knitting is the Planting Seeds by Helen Stewart. This is number 4 in the Shawl Society 3 collection, and as you can see, it's a 3-color shawl, kind of a not quite semicircle, crescent, I guess, in shape. Pardon me. The original calls for what's classified as a lace weight, but Helen says is more like a light fingering yarn. And I chose to do mine with a fairly light fingering, Louette Gems fingering, and the colors I chose were Pure White, Neptune, and Charcoal. And I'm happy to say I'm very close to the end. I have this much yarn left of the charcoal, and I have about 6 more rows plus the bind off to work on this. The rows are very long now. They are, better turn them around, they are almost 500 stitches long, so it takes a while to get across a row. As far as I know, I'll have enough yarn to finish as written. I have noticed, because I've been weighing kind of leftovers as I've been going along, and I'm definitely using more yarn than the sample did. Pardon me, I think the biggest reason for that is I'm actually knitting it on the size needles that's recommended, which is 4 millimeters, and that's unusual for me. Usually I go down to 3.5 because I am a loose knitter, but I thought I wouldn't mind having a little more drape and eeriness in this shawl, since it was originally knit in a lace weight or a finer yarn, so I wanted to mimic that lightness. So in which case it's taken me more yarn, but like I say, I think I'm going to be okay. And if I have to omit a row or two, it's really not going to make much difference. So there you can see it begins with the Pure White. Then the Neptune is introduced for that slip stitch pattern, and then the charcoal is added into that. And then I've done a stripe of Neptune and working on the last stripe of charcoal. So it's definitely a lot of garter stitch. Other than the one row or the 2 rows you do slip stitch, it's mostly a garter stitch shawl, which was perfect. I actually had, to be perfectly honest, it's been kind of not a great week. There's had some just things going on in our personal life that's caused some stress, anxiety, and this has been a great project to work on. Very mindless and good to calm my mind and keep my hands busy. So I have to say that's mostly what I worked on this past week, and it did serve that purpose of therapy knitting very well. So yeah, there we go, almost done, and I'm happy to be almost done. I'm ready to move on to the next one, which actually just came out today, and I will talk about that in a few minutes. Try not to jiggle here. The other project that I worked on I guess last week and this week is the Tulamine Mystery Shawl by Tabitha Hedrick. So fair warning, if you do not want to be spoiled, look away now, come back in a few minutes, because I'm going to talk about it and show it. So up to the beginning of clue 4. So see you in a minute. As I mentioned, I've been working on the Tulamine Mystery Shawl, and I am working it in 3 colors of Sweet Georgia Tough Love Sock. Yes, a recurring theme. The main color is this beautiful teal, and I'm not sure how it's actually on the camera showing up pretty well today. Sometimes it looks more blue, but it's definitely a greeny blue teal color, and that's called Sea Spray. And then contrasting color 1 is this kind of an appley spring green, and it is a one-of-a-kind skein. I bought it through a sale that Sweet Georgia had with one-of-a-kinds and misdyes and things like that. So this is up to the end. This side is up to the end of clue 3. And I believe I explained last week I had to fudge a little bit with the end of clue 3 because I didn't have enough of the main color to finish it as written. But that's fine. I'm happy with how that turned out. I did it a little bit differently than the pattern suggested, but I think it works. And then clue 4, we got to add in our third color. So this is my third color, contrasting color 2, which is Mirror Pond. And as you can see, it incorporates that same teal blue and a few different shades of kind of spring green or acid green. And so I have finished the clue 4 on one side of the shawl, and here it is. So you can see, kind of carry on with the same theme of the lace repeats sections, kind of broken up with sections of stocking stitch and garter stitch, garter ridges. And so I will show this to you kind of in its entirety as much as I can. So I like the way the colors are kind of going from dark to light, and it's definitely more interesting to knit with the variegated skein. That's helping to keep my interest because, and it's also nice to have the clues kind of break it up into small bites. I guess this is what, about probably 5 inches or so, this clue. And it didn't take that long. I did it all in one 24-hour period. And so it is definitely doable to keep up with this shawl each week. I've managed to do that. So yeah, so that's what I've been knitting. As for up and coming, as I mentioned, the latest Helen Stewart Shawl Society pattern was released today. It's called Learning to Cry, which is not a reference from the book The Secret Garden, but from the movie, which I have not seen. And it's an asymmetrical triangle, and it features stripes, or I guess stripes is the right way to put it, of a fingering weight single striped with sections of lace weight mohair silk. So you have a couple of different textures going on there. So we had received word about this shawl, kind of a heads up about the yarn, I think just, I don't know, I want to say a week or 2 ago, and I hadn't given it really much thought at all. And I don't have tons of mohair in my stash, but I do have a few skeins of different either mohair nylon or mohair silk blends. So I pulled all of those out, and then I kind of went through my stash to see what yarns might match up with them. Unfortunately, some of the matches that I liked, I didn't have enough of the fingering weight yarn to go with it. And so a few of my choices, like this one, I thought was really pretty. This Ancient Arts Stellina, no, it's like a sparkly sock yarn. And I have this beautiful lace weight merino or mohair silk. Do you remember, do you remember? That's a silly question. I used to listen to, what was the podcast name? Blanking. I will try and remember and put it here on the bottom of the screen. But the 2 women who hosted it lived in San Francisco. And when I went to San Francisco in 2010, I think it was, I went to Art Yarns, which is one of the shops they used to talk about. And actually, it was really kind of cool. I'm looking at I'm looking at yarns on a shelf. And then I hear people talking, and I'm thinking, I think that's them. And it was Jenny and Nicole. Probably those of you who are familiar with the podcast are shouting the name of it to me. So sure enough, I peek around the corner and I said, I thought that was you. And so we had a nice little chat. They were actually recording there that day, and they asked me if I wanted to be on the podcast, but I was feeling much too shy for that. Plus, my husband and my sister and my brother-in-law were all waiting for me in the shop to shop. And so I really didn't want to delay them any more than necessary. Plus, it would have been really I'd have to be very self-conscious to be sitting there yakking with them with those people sitting and watching me. So I did it, but I could have been a star way back then. Anyway, what was cool about art yarns is they had all sorts of neat, very unique yarns, and then you decided how much you wanted, and they would wind it off onto a cone. So that's a long way of saying I have this really nice silk mohair called Tsuki, and it is, yes, 40% silk, 60% super kid mohair. And I would have had enough of this to do that shawl, but I don't have enough of this. But one day I am going to do something with these two together, because I think it would be just a beautiful, nice, dressy shawl. So that's a long way of saying I'm not going to be knitting this project out of these yarns. Another one that I've looked at and kind of decided probably wouldn't work either, although I really love the combination. I have these two yarns. See how gorgeous, kind of a periwinkle blue. You may remember this. I've tried to use this before for a Helen Stewart shawl. It is Kinfolk Steadfast Sock, Kinfolk Yarn and Fiber, Steadfast Sock in the Port Moody colorway. And Port Moody is the name of the city where I grew up. It is at the end of the inlet that runs through Vancouver. So Burrard Inlet divides downtown Vancouver from the North Shore, and it ends at Port Moody. So that's where I grew up. And when I saw this yarn, I think it was like a year and a half ago at the Fibers West, I saw that name and I knew I had to have it. So it's kind of a special skein for that reason. This is also kind of a special skein. It is, well, mostly because it's very luxurious. It's called Superior, and it is 70% cashmere and 30% silk. It's just this beautiful, so soft. I'll show you the label. And I bought this in Toronto about 10 years ago at my very first fiber event that I went to. I was helping out a friend of mine at her booth. I've talked about her before, Lori from Ocean Wind Knits. So did a little walk around. I ended up buying this, and it came with this pattern, which for this little scarf, which I've never actually made. And I'm somewhere along the line, and I don't remember where I picked up these beads that really go nicely with it. And so, again, I think one day, these might become something. The reason I'm hesitating on this combination is that this Superior is quite a bit finer than the yarn that was used in the sample, and I have a fair bit more than the pattern calls for. So because it's such a special yarn, I want to pick a project where I'm going to be able to use most of it. I don't want sort of a leftover amount that's not really good for anything. I would have had enough of this color, of this yarn though, so I'm kind of regretting it. But again, it's something I feel like I can look forward to knitting one day, because I think they just go together really, really well. Oh, I wish you could feel how very, very soft this yarn is. It's just amazing. Just gonna tuck that away. with the beads. Yeah, and I think it needs to have beads. I've got to use those. I think, if I remember correctly, I think one of the patterns I've considered for this is the Yarn Harlot, Stephanie Pearl McPhee. She has like a cowl called, I think it's Pretty Thing. And I remember thinking about that for this. But now that I see these together, I'm kind of tempted to use these together. So what I think I'm leaning towards is using this yarn. It's a beautiful, I think it's wool and silk blend. It's from Alpha B Yarn. It's 50% superwash merino, 50% silk in the Duchesse de, I don't have my glasses on, and this one's hard to read. Duchesse de Brabant, B-R-A-B-A-N-T. That's the name of the colorway. And what I'm thinking of is pairing it with this mohair silk blend. Now what's sort of funny about this is I'll show you the shawl that I made with this stuff already. And I kept the labels, but I kept the wrong labels. I kept the labels for the other yarn that I used in that shawl, not for this. So I had to look on my project page, and then I neglected to write it down. So I'll put again at the bottom of the screen, this is what this yarn is called. But you can see it has pink and it has gray and it has this other kind of a darker pink. And even though it will end up kind of striping because this stripes, I think that'll be okay. Divide up the different sections with the stripes. And earlier this year, I knit this shawl called Swerve out of the other ball of this that I had. So this gives you an idea of how it stripes up. And as you can see, in this shawl, it's also alternated with a more solid yarn. So you get a sense of how it'll knit up. So I'm kind of glad to have a purpose for that leftovers, because at the time when I bought it, I didn't realize I only would need one skein of it, and I had bought two. So I figured that would be a good use for the yarn. I think the colors, at least in real life, go together well. It's hard to say on the screen. Sometimes the colors don't come up true to life. This is definitely a very pinky pink, a real, on the screen it looks very pale, but in true life it's not as strong as a bubblegum pink, but it definitely has more depth than it shows on there. I just can't get it on the screen to look as it does in real life, so it's hard to tell. But I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with this anyway and just see how it knits up. As for what I've been reading this week, I've continued listening to Fear by Bob Woodward. I think I'm about maybe halfway through the book. I try and keep this podcast very non-political, so I'm reading it. I'm not going to say anything beyond that, one way or the other, although obviously I do have my own opinions. I just don't think this is the place to necessarily share them. And I've been reading By the Shores of Silver Lake by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I'm almost done. Been enjoying reading this one again. This is one of my favorite books in the series. Yesterday I read the part about when they moved into the surveyor's house for the winter, and I had the good fortune to tour the surveyor's house this past summer, and definitely reading about it again, I could picture the rooms that they're talking about and the size of it, which it was like the biggest house that Laura had ever lived in, and it was not very big by any stretch of the imagination. And when I've just been reading about towards the beginning of spring, a number of homesteaders are coming to the area to start staking their claims, starting their claims, and also people are coming to build businesses in the town. And the only place to stay was at the surveyor's house where the Ingalls family was living. And so they took in boarders. One night she describes 15 men sleeping in the living room, dining room area. And when we did our tour, maybe we had that many on the tour, and we could stand in there, but it was close quarters. I have no idea how that many people would have found a place to lay their head. It was not a very big building at all. So it's really cool, as I mentioned when I was reading on the banks of Plum Creek, to be able to visualize the setting for this book, particularly the surveyor's house. So since we last spoke, I've also been reading ahead in Pioneer Girl. And so I believe I talked about last week how the Little House series does not incorporate, there's a gap in the series between On the Banks of Plum Creek and By the Shores of Silver Lake. And it was a time period that wasn't particularly happy for the Ingalls family. They had suffered illness. They'd lost a child, a young boy, baby boy. And so there was also just the issue of the timing, because when they wrote this series, they took some events out of place. And in order to have Laura at the right age to be moving, Laura and the others in the family, in order to sort of have them in the right age group and the right time period, she skipped over these couple of years of her life. But they are included in her original manuscript. They spent some time in a place called Burr Oak, Iowa, helping to run a hotel, and then Pa had shares in a mill, grist mill, and then they actually moved back to Walnut Grove, not to the homestead on Plum Creek, but they lived in a few different places in town, and Pa did a series of jobs there before his sister asked him to come work for the railroad, which is how the beginning of By the Shores of Silver Lake takes place. And so more or less from here on out, the series very closely follows Laura's real life. And so I am now slightly behind in here than I am in the book. As of yesterday afternoon, I was basically at the same spot. I had caught up to Christmas on Silver Lake in the series and in this book. And I actually realized too, when I got this book, I started reading it, and then for some reason I got sidetracked. If you've been watching this podcast, you know that happens with me sometimes with my reading. So I had a bookmark in here from before, and I caught up to it and surpassed it yesterday. So now everything I'm reading in here is new to me. So I am looking forward to continuing this journey of reading the series and reading this and kind of getting a fuller picture of Laura's life and how it's portrayed in her book, what she chooses to include, what she chooses not to include, how she sometimes takes an incident that happened to in one part of her life, for instance, and will incorporate it in a totally different time. So for instance, she in her manuscript talks about her time in Burr Oak, and the school teacher was threatened by some of the older schoolboys who were going to school, and he kind of bested them. And while that incident doesn't appear in any of the stories about Laura in the series, she incorporates it into her husband's childhood story, Farmer Boy. And in that case, the teacher uses a whip to whip these boys into shape. And in the real life incident, he used a ruler and caught the leader by surprise and used corporal punishment on him at school. Now it just seems shocking, doesn't it? I mean, even when I grew up, you could get the strap, and then that was somehow, some point was abolished from our school. So that type of thing is not that far in the past. But when you read about the sort of leeway that teachers back then had with their students, it's pretty striking. In any quick case, that's something totally unrelated. So anyway, I'm enjoying this book for sure, and I think it's neat that I get to read those parts now for the first time, because the stuff I was reading before was reading it for the second time. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I don't want to go into detail. It's just like I say, it's been kind of not a great week. Feeling in a much better state of mind today than I was a few days ago, and while there's still stuff going on, it's some of it's out of our control, and you just have to roll with it. Do your best not to let it get you down. We are babysitting the grandkids tonight, so Jessica and Neil can have a little date night. They've had a busy, kind of stressful time themselves lately, so that'll give them a little bit of a break. This Sunday we are golfing in my husband's work tournament. That's always fun. They have a really nice course that they book for it, and always a really nice dinner afterwards. So that should be fun, and the weather's supposed to be better by then, so that'll be good. And then Monday, it's my turn to host our ladies' nights, a group of women, some that I used to work with, and then some other friends that we all invited someone into this group. I think we've been together now doing this for I think about 14 or 15 years. Once a month there's a group of us that get together, and the host provides dessert and beverages, and we take turns bringing appies. So usually 2 or 3 or 4 appies a night, and then the dessert. And it really wasn't my turn, but the person who was supposed to host it put out a cry for help. Her daughter's moving and her house is full of boxes, and she just asked if someone else would take it on. So I didn't see anyone else respond, and so I said I would. And then I found out someone else had responded, but it was in privately. We do all our stuff by email. And she's like, "Oh no, you go ahead." And I'm like, "Oh no, you go ahead." And honestly, I was really hoping she'd go ahead, but she didn't. So it's my turn. It will be fine. It's always fun to get together, and we haven't seen each other since May or June. So that'll be good. It's always good to catch up. It's just, I probably would have been happy with one less thing going on this week, but it is what it is. And other than that, just normal everyday stuff going on. I have been really good about getting out and walking most days, and I'm feeling good about that. Had a few different appointments, eyes. They're good. I was glad. He said, "Oh no, your prescription, it should be fine for another year." It's like, oh good, it's been an expensive summer. I really didn't need to buy new glasses this year. Anyway, so just basic, normal, everyday kind of stuff going on. That's it. So I hope you all have a great week. I should be back next week, bar anything unexpected coming up. So yeah, take care of yourselves till then. Again, thanks for watching, and thanks for reaching out. I always appreciate it. So you take care. Happy knitting. Bye.